Hi, I'm Hayana Verissimo. I'm a senior product designer for the release management group here at GitLab. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about the state of the user experience for settings at GitLab, what we learned from our design stakeholders, and discuss some of the opportunities to address the pain points of our users as well as of our design team. Settings have been a persistent issue reported by our customers over the last couple of years. We know that the target audience for settings is very broad, so all GitLab users with permission to change settings are our target audience. This means that small improvements can result in highly impactful user experience. When we look back at existing user research insights, we find multiple references to issues and features improvements that relate to settings. A very good example is this admin in project settings survey conducted by Kathleen around a year ago. In the past, Matei also did a great job validating the redesign of the settings pages. This project was related to improving the discoverability of items that resulted into suggestions around prioritizing content, improving the expandable sections, shifting content around, and so on. You can read all the insights in this blog post. This year, Nadia Odalova and I looked into both existing insights and feedback from our customers, as well as results of the previous research for settings. Our goal is to improve the GitLab settings experience in order to drive the user experience and the system usability skills core improvements. Our vision is to help facilitate the alignment on settings user flows, components, interaction patterns, and layouts and templates, ensuring that our teams are empowered to build a clear and consistent settings experience across GitLab. Our plan was divided in 5 steps. The first one by evaluating the existing UX issues related to settings and defining low-hanging fruits. Doing some discovery by speaking with individual stage groups to figure what were the vision items and upcoming settings requirements. And then identify DRIs and counterparts. So we reach out to design teams and identify people that can help us and share responsibility with them. And next, we want to set up some meetings and define some goals and the overall vision for settings. In the first step, the evaluation, we came across some very well-defined teams or areas to focus on settings. The first one is discoverability of settings. This is mainly related to the navigation and the ability to find settings items using the search bar. There is also the global versus feature settings mix, where users don't know where they should look for settings. So the switch of navigational flow makes it difficult for many to fully enable and configure a certain feature. They need to jump from one section of settings to another, to a feature page, and so on. There's also an issue with the options overload. So more roles and personas that use a product means that the number of settings and different features will increase. And also UI consistency. So the patterns that we use today are inconsistent across the product. Our first step when evaluating the settings UX issue was to spot some of the low-hanging fruits that could potentially serve as a backlog of quick wins. So I mapped out issues and assigned them to team epics. So the first one was one related to bugs. So those are issues that I consider ready for development. They are issues that report undesirable or incorrect behavior, though these don't really require any validation. We know how they should work and we just need to fix them. Features are things that, they're feature requests, they might require validation, and most of the time they need to be assigned to a specific stage group, so they belong to someone. They belong to settings in a specific context. And the third one is settings re-architecture or redesign. So those are bigger changes involving UI and also UX enhancements. They touch multiple pages and they touch things that scatter across the product. Those might require validation. In the bug sub-epic, I identified 43 improvements that we believe were shovel ready. And then I refined this list with 12 items that I believe were the super low-hanging fruits that designers could tackle. These involve mostly UX depth, bugs, and UI polish. A lesson learned here is that simply listing this problem and pinging people was not enough. The main challenge is that since settings, it's still under group not owned, these cross-vertical issues were very difficult to prioritize. So the bystander effect persisted. Only 5 issues from this list received some update or some attention from product, but none of them were prioritized or scheduled yet. Emily Van Hoffman wrote a very interesting blog post that speaks about handling engineering-led issues that don't belong to one team. And we know that even with a dedicated team tackling these issues, there will always exist some boundary conditions. So when it comes to the user experience, it is vital that as design practitioners, we can count with product to prioritize work that transcends these product areas. Nevertheless, we continue the experimentation by speaking with individual stage groups about revision and upcoming setting requirements. And I had a chance to talk to a total of 10 designers from different stage groups to understand the struggles and visions for settings UX. I also talked to Catherine, UX researcher for Create, who shared some of her hands-first experience when conducting research for settings. You can watch all the recordings and the conversations on Unfiltered. The insights shared by our teams of designers were not so different from the actionable insights collected from the navigation system usability questionnaire that Catherine tackled just recently. During these interviews, we had a chance to touch base on some of the topics of interest per stage group. The main challenge for designers when thinking of settings was first defining a target audience. We know, as I said, that settings has a broader target audience. For example, in release orchestration, we have many jobs to be done that tackle and that cater to a mix of personas. We want to give customers, for example, the ability to see and manage deploy freezes. We need to consider that some of these tasks are performed by release managers that are not really dev-oriented. But we also have DevOps engineers responsible for release management tasks. So we want the UI experience for settings to be as seamless as the API experience without adding any conflict to all of these different personas. Another challenge is related to the UI. So designers shared recurring concern regarding the overall user experience and interaction that we currently have for settings. Some of the challenges mentioned were related to the lack of standardized UI elements and patterns, which leads to inconsistent designs as we know today. For example, there's a mix of toggles and radio buttons in multiple places in the UIs. Also, in some areas of settings, you save an item by clicking the save button, while in the same page, you have a different area of the form that works with autosave. So we need to get better at defining these patterns and also applying them correctly in the product. Also, the poor visual aspect and interaction design was a recurring issue. One of the main issues relates to the expand and collapse areas of settings, which makes it difficult to access certain parts of the product. The UI text was also mentioned. Designers say that it can be very verbose and not so helpful. The setting copy is not so clear. We receive user feedback related to that, and it can be sometimes even confusing. The patterns of that describes the functionality on the top of the collapsible area can be confusing to users that are not super dev oriented. A next super interesting item was contextual settings. The cost of context shifting for settings means that users are spending extra time to figure out where to find the correct options in order to complete their tasks. The lack of context is, in this case, an anti-pattern. This relates to navigation as well. Defining context when it comes to GitLab can be a huge task, but discussing how contextual settings can be made available to our users in particular situations or product areas can help shape the overall interactions of such a complex system. Our designers agree that contextual settings are going to be very important in the future, and that we want to build relevant, customized user experience, potentially based on data. So some of the recurring challenges relate to settings at the group level that cascade to projects. So how do we give users context of what's at the group level? In general, settings are hard to find, and we can solve that by bringing settings closer to the thing they affect. For example, by adding entry points to settings in the feature page. You verify as well, users have to go to settings to install a runner. The instructions give you an URL for an instance, registration token, and so on. And you need this specific information to register a runner. So you always have to go to settings. The problem is that part of this process is in a separate page. And people forget that the registration happens many times in a different product area because they just simply don't check settings. Information architecture is another super broad topic that mainly focuses on navigation. Today, we know that similar to navigation, setting has been a consistent issue in GitLab. Navigation affects the understanding of the product and how users are able to complete their tasks. The reason is setting in general deals with both detail and non-detail focused tasks. That means that when it comes to navigating and working with GitLab, users tend to manage options specific to the task they want to complete, but also looking into broader general settings. We need to understand how users categorize information about settings and also where they expect to find settings in GitLab. Our research team has a very interesting issue that covers the information architecture topic and that which overlaps with settings UX. We also brainstormed some ideas for how we can make it easier for users to find settings information in our docs. GitLab is a very technical product, but we cannot expect people to just know how things work out of the box. What we see is users going outside of GitLab to get help. They rely heavily on Google to figure how to set things up, and most of the time they end up in our official documentation. Still, when you check the docs, you need time to figure where things are. So we can do a couple of things. Every time we talk about settings in the docs, we can highlight that information. And while much of the instructions already exist in the UI of the product, we can get better at helping the users that are trying to complete complex tasks. We also learned that designers are super proud of some of the work related to settings they delivered in the past. Package worked on container registry cleanup for tags, leaving a very human and approachable UX. In Enablement, GeoSettings UX was updated just a few months ago. In Manage, we were able to improve a couple of setting screens on the project and group level, updating section labels and descriptions that help with the usability. Investigation is happening to define whether or not we should consider adding a settings area specifically for secure. We also learned what our designers are going to be working next. Today, the different stage groups are going to be focused on settings at the group level, since there's a very strong desire to bring configuration to a higher level across the product. Release management, package, verify, and create have been working on this team. Contextual settings is being tackled by a secure monitor, who have issues to discuss implementation of in-context settings that can bring configuration closer to users by using the left navigation menu and also shortcuts in the feature pages. Information architecture, it's an interesting item tackled by growth that will work on making it easier to get an overview of settings related to the instance, license, upgrade to a higher plan, and etc. Finally, some of the opportunities. For Pajamas, our design system, we can provide more guidance and reuse. Designers want the out-of-the-box ability to design with settings by reusing UI elements, layouts, as well as make use of documentation and settings best practice. So we're going to open a couple of issues around documenting how settings should be designed, and that will be available in Pajamas. We also want to define guidelines around information architecture, for example, how to organize information in settings, how not to do it, and provide some good examples. We want to empower designers to contribute to settings. So we want to facilitate the conversation between stage groups in a workshop, like what Growth did around the first time experience in GitLab. And we want to collaborate with the Growth team, since now they own navigation as a category. We need your help to keep this initiative moving forward. So if you would like to contribute, please look into the main settings UX epic and see if one of the issues that are listed there belong to your stage group, or that could be tackled in the upcoming milestone. If you're a designer, you can work with your product manager to try to prioritize these issues, and then we can continue the discussion. Also, feel free to drop some of your thoughts and some of your upcoming items in the same epic and join a conversation in the F settings Slack channel. And finally, collaborate with other stage groups. If you're designing something that revolves settings at the group level, please share this experience. If you're doing investigation and validating things with our users, let us know what works and what doesn't. This will help us shape the vision for settings. That's it. Thank you so much. If this topic of any of these issues interests you or you're excited to learn more, please reach out to me at Hyana. Thank you.